Welcome to the Potion Podcast, your raw look at the hospitality industry, brought to you by SHC.
Down this road. Okay, cool. All right. Hey, pal, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Shawn Soole. I'm based here in Victoria, BC,
Yeah,
and I
where
run
do you work?
Clive's Classic
Perfect.
Lounge.
Yeah. Surely some listeners are confused by your not at all Canadian sounding accent. Where are you from originally, and how long have you been in Victoria?
I've been in Victoria for almost 20 years, 20 years in a couple of like 18 years right now. And so I came from Australia and moved here for a girl. That didn't quite pan out.
I know that
And
one.
then I met my wife and
Yeah,
I fell in love with the city. Like it's a gorgeous city and it's my home.
incredible. When you moved to Victoria, were you already making drinks, or is that something you stumbled upon in Victoria?
Oh no, I've been in. I'm celebrating 25 years, 26 years this year, in the bar industry. So I've been making cocktails for a long time. Did very well for myself in Australia, and when I came to Canada, like 2006, Canada, I think you can attest to this was not exactly a hotbed for cocktails the way it is now.
Correct.
So I always tell the story. I got a job at Moxie's, not knowing what a franchise was. We don't have
Right.
them in Australia. Like
Right.
we have Burger King and that sort of thing, but we don't have
Sorry, do you
like
have Burger
restaurant
King or do you have
franchises.
Hungry Jack's?
We have Hungry Jacks, I know. And I always tell the story because my very first shift behind the bar, I got an order for an Americano, and
Mm,
I was like, "This place is legit." Yes, people are ordering Americanos, and I made an Americano cocktail, put it up on the bar top. Very proud of myself. It looked gangster. Um, and then the server comes over like, "What's this?" I'm like, "It's an Americano." Take it to the guest. She's like, "No, coffee." And I'm like, "What do you mean an Americano coffee?" And then she explained, I'm like, "That sounds disgusting." And so I ended up making a coffee. And then I realized very quickly in a short span of about a week, uh, Victoria and Canada were a little bit behind Australia.
Okay, so this figures into exactly what I wanted to ask you about. A few years back, you put together a book that dealt exclusively with the cocktail culture in Victoria. It was called Cocktail Culture, I think.
Yep.
In it, you talked about how being comparatively, a small city, Victoria's love of cocktails is very much like front of mind, world class. Why do you think cocktails have been so nurtured in Victoria?
Cocktail culture came out in 2013. So we're looking at 10 years ago. And I think even looking back compared to now, we had a very vibrant culture. Obviously, the culture keeps evolving and getting better. I think Victoria was just that right time, right time, right position.
Mm-hmm.
And so Solomon's opened up a couple of years before I took over Clive. I took over Clive's originally in 2009. Solomon's opened up in 2008 and sort of introduced like New York style cocktails because that's the sort of style that Clive, Solomon's wanted to be. Then we got Clive's that started rolling. And then Veneto opened up, and Solomon and Simon both moved over there. So Simon Ogden and Solomon. So there was us three sort of nurturing a really good, vibrant team of people, and I think we all sort of like um, complemented each other, and that sort of helped the clientele as well. The clientele was hungry for it, and eventually they started like really going. And so you only need when you're in a small city, you only need a small amount of people. So Veneto was like 140 seats, I think, and we're like 75. So if you're full, there's 250 people really liking cocktails, and you can be full most of the week.
Yeah.
So then that sort of spread and started spreading into the bartenders, and bartenders at other venues started doing good cocktails, and so it just went from there. And because the clientele sort of asked for it, we just did it.
Do you feel like cocktails is a logical, like Victorians getting into cocktails is a logical extension? Because on Victoria and on Vancouver Island in general, people are pretty serious about coffee and brewing and a lot of other artisanal stuff. Do you feel like Victoria specifically is sort of a like an artisanal sort of interesting city in that way?
Oh yeah, I think I remember doing it. What was it called? Picha Kucha,
Oh,
Picha Kucha.
Pecha yeah, sure.
Ayacucho. I remember doing a seminar about that and like a quick talk about it. It was like people will go to their favorite coffee shop and drink a single origin Guatemalan, and then they'll go to their favorite restaurant and order a locally craft IPA, and then they sort of were still like not really showing the love to cocktails, but it quickly sort of went that way. Like beer
Mm-hmm.
culture, coffee culture, food culture in a small city sort of just spread, and then cocktails started becoming a thing.
Mm-hmm. Um, all right, let's get into it. Shawn, how does the shaft fit into all this? At Clive's,
Um,
you guys offer a shaft, right?
we do. It's called the Samuel L. Jackson.
Okay, and
So,
how do you make your shaft?
so I fell in love with Mr. Black's coffee amaro when I was in Singapore in 2019. Just absolutely adored it. I put it in the freezer. That was my like industry shot. Was the
Mm,
coffee amaro, which makes complete sense. Like you want coffee and you want a bitter. Away we go. So when I came back to Canada, I couldn't find it. So I just bought I bought, well, I didn't buy, I brought in all these Amaros that we have a massive Amaro collection. So we do an Amaro blend of like 4 or 5 different Amaros, an espresso liqueur, as well as a Hey Happy coffee concentrate that we get from Hey
hmm
Happy down on Johnson. So it's called the Mr. Happy Amaro. And so it's
hmm
literally just 2 ounces of Mr. Happy Amaro topped with 40 Creek cream. And then we've got a chai tea version, which is called the John Travolta. So we have like two two
Sure.
shafts that one doesn't have coffee, it has chai tea. It's still Amaro based and it still has Frangelico instead of coffee liqueur, and it's got like chai tea, but still made the exact same way as the Samuel.
uh, so you have the. This is not related at all, but are you familiar as a Victorian? Are you familiar with the band No Means No?
Vaguely.
Yeah, so they have an album called Why Do They Call Me Mr. Happy? And in a roundabout way, you ended up making the most Victoria version of a shaft by calling your drink Mr. Happy. That's really funny. Sorry, doesn't have anything to do with anything. As a scholar, though, Shawn, of classic cocktails, you have as many certifications as anybody. How do you feel about variations on the shaft around Victoria?
I think it's Victoria's cocktail. Like I
Mm-hmm.
will say that it's Victoria's cocktail, and the amount of different styles like bounce around. It's kind of like our Negroni riff if you were in Milan. Like
Sure,
if you're in Milan, I'm sure there's
sure.
a billion Negroni riffs. The shaft is riffed in different bars. I've seen ones with gold leaf on the ice cube and everything else in between. So
Yeah,
people do like a rim of sprinkles and do like a donut shaft. There's just anything you can possibly imagine being applied to espresso, cream liqueur, and a base. It's
yeah.
been done in Victoria.
So when is a shaft no longer a shaft?
As long as it still has those components of like a creamy cream liqueur and some sort of invigorating. So like I wouldn't even, yeah, John Travolta probably wouldn't even fall into what a shaft is, but
Mm,
that invigorating coffee and cream liqueur, those are the two things that I think are the benchmarks. Is kind of like Campari having, well, even then there's a white Negroni, so that doesn't even count. So I'm trying to use the
yeah.
Negroni as an example. But like I think that's when those two ingredients, as long as they're in there, and now with 40 Creek having a Nanaimo bar and a butter tart and stuff like that, it's just going mental.
hmm you just a second ago referred to the shaft as being Victoria's cocktail, but Shawn, where was the shaft created?
Oh, it was great, Calgary.
Yeah. How did it
I don't get.
migrate to Victoria? Like, do you know the story of how it migrated from Calgary to Victoria or any stops
From
it made
what I've
along the way?
heard, from what I've heard, bartenders who were working in Banff found it in Calgary and then brought it back to Victoria, and it did become Victoria's cocktail. I, have been thinking about this coming up to this interview because I've been really racking my brain about this one coming up to this interview. Is like even though the Mai Tai was created in Oakland, California, I
Hmm.
would suggest to say that the Mai Tai is Hawaii's cocktail.
Right.
You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like even though
Yeah.
the creation was somewhere, there's a definite Mai Tai culture in Hawaii that every resort in Hawaii has to have a Mai Tai of some sort. But it
hmm
was created in Oakland, California, which is the most unlikely place to create a drink of that sort of caliber.
Yeah.
So I do believe it was created in Calgary, but I do believe that it's a Victoria cocktail.
Sure. Why do you think Victoria has grabbed onto the shaft so intensely? Like, what is it about Victoria and Victorians that makes the shaft so much theirs or yours?
I think you're interviewing Rocky at the same time. Like I don't know the bartenders' names, but I know the bartenders at the time at Yugo's when the shaft really sort of stuck and started taking over. It was made prolific because of them. Not necessarily
Right.
the drink itself. It was the person pouring the drink that it became prolific. And it was that culture of like, hey, you've got to try this, or hey, you want to pick me up, hey, you don't want to Jaeger bomb, let's do
Mm,
this. And so I think it's more about the people who were pouring it and the people who introduced it to Victoria more than Victoria itself.
yeah. Gotcha. In Victoria, though, and this is something you and I were in Calgary a couple times together earlier this year, but in Victoria, it's pretty common to see the shaft, whether it's a classic or a version, like you said, the donut shaft or whatever, listed on a
Mhm.
menu. But in Calgary, it's definitely more of a word of mouth thing. Like no one bothers listing it in Calgary. Do you have any guesses about why that might be?
The crazy thing is that when I first started having these arguments with people about where the shaft came from,
Not
I've been
discussions, arguments.
Facebook is a very hard place sometimes. I'd been to Calgary a couple of times, and you couldn't find it in Calgary. Like
Mm,
it wasn't even a thing outside the living room.
hmm.
It wasn't a thing at any other bars. Even if you asked for it by name, it still wasn't a thing. So I'm not sure what happened during the pandemic and stuff. Like last time we were in Calgary together, like I saw people having it on tap and nitro and all this sort of crazy stuff.
Hmm.
That wasn't the case pre-pandemic.
Right.
It wasn't something that was well known or widespread in Calgary, even though it was created there. But for some reason now, it's almost like classic Albertans just like, no, it's our cocktail. We're going to take it back. Um, but it's one of those things like I would say 5 years ago, most Calgarians wouldn't know what a shaft was in comparison to Victorians.
Right. And you think that probably has to do with Victoria being so dedicated to food and beverage and also the idea that bartenders are putting it on the list.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's the big thing. And so yeah, it was kind of surprising going back to Calgary for the first time. I think I don't know, it's been a couple of times, but like when we were there together, that was the first time I sort of like really went round to like a few pubs and stuff and seeing
Hmm.
shafts on the menu. I was just like, oh, I didn't see this like 5 years ago.
Right. Um, I know we've already sort of talked about it, but would you say that even though the drink was born somewhere else, let's say Calgary, imagine it was Brisbane, but should we now consider it a Victoria thing?
Oh, for sure. No,
Yeah. 100%.
100%. Like that's things I'm happy to tell people that no, it's Calgary that created it. 100% okay with that. But it is Victoria's cocktail. Like even if you go to Vancouver, I get messages from bartenders all the time, like, "Hey, I got it," and it's literally Friday night at 6 o'clock, and I'm at home, and there's like, I got someone sitting in the bar, and they're asking for a shaft. What the fuck is a shaft? And it's
Yeah.
just like, like, and I'm like, it's okay. So Vancouver's not even sort of, even though we're so close, it's definitely a very
Hmm.
localized Victorian cocktail. And I would say Vancouver Island, because I'm sure if you go to Nanaimo, you can get a Nanaimo bar shaft, which is definitely
Hmm.
possible.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Uh,
even though it's Calgary's cocktail, it's Victoria's cocktail.
yeah. Just because it was born one place doesn't necessarily mean that's what it
100%.
is anymore. Yeah. Um, have you encountered the shaft in any city that you were surprised by it? I mean, we talked about Calgary, a little bit Banff, maybe like Golden, Lake Louise, Victoria, and probably all over the island at this point. But is there any place where you've been and been surprised that a shaft showed up or that someone knew what a shaft was?
I don't think so.
So it stayed
I don't,
pretty localized to just like
yeah,
specific Western Canadian towns.
yeah, I don't think so. But also, like, when I'm out with the team or I'm out with some guests from out of town, I'm gonna probably have a shaft, but it's not like a go-to must-have. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
usually when I'm out with a group of people that will do it at the pub or something like that, just to do a pick-me-up halfway through a family outing with the team. But like
Yeah.
I don't go out to drink shafts that much.
Yeah. It's more of a team building exercise than a drink.
Yeah, exactly. Like how fast can you drink a shaft? Because everybody thinks that they can get the old man not to drink a shaft as fast as some of the youngsters, and I just blow them away in two gulps. So it's just
Yep.
like, yeah.
Yeah. Shawn, thank you so much for talking to me about the shaft. I really
Thanks for
appreciate it.
listening, Pose Shifters. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.